All right. So thank you to Tech Lancaster for having me. Thank you for that introduction. Um, it's great to be here. Great to meet everybody. I want to talk to you about how I used the no-code platform Bubble to solve a very specific problem that I had when I arrived in Lancaster. So that's what this is about. I just want to give you kind of a brief introduction to myself so you kind of know where I'm coming from. I am new to Lancaster. I went to high school in Chester County. Grew up in Delaware, high school in Chester County, then lived in Chicago for about 20 years before kind of got tired of that, and my wife and I decided that we wanted kind of a change of pace. We wanted to be closer to family. So we looked at Lancaster as kind of like one of the great options. Like, we didn't want to do big city living. We're like, Lancaster just seems like a Goldilocks type place. So we came here in August, and so far we absolutely love it. So um, in terms of my career, I spent about 10 years doing consulting for small and medium-sized businesses. A lot of them are from Scandinavia, and I got kind of a taste for helping companies from getting started in the U.S. up until a kind of growth and scaling. And one thing it did was it really kind of excited me to do my own thing. Like, the more companies that I met, more executives I met and founders, kind of the more I kind of got a taste for like entrepreneurship. And I just thought, let me just try doing like my own thing and see what I can do. So at a certain point, after kind of moonlighting and trying different projects, I decided to just like totally quit. And I did what I knew how to do, which was something I always loved to do, which was art and illustration. And so that set me off on this long path as a solopreneur, which I've been doing now for about 10 years. But in doing that, I kind of took what I learned from small business consulting and just applied it to like an arts creative-based business. And so that business is called Wonder City Studio. And it's basically like the theme is architecture. And what I do is really just like I look at ideas, things that I'm into, things that kind of spark my curiosity. And then I kind of execute in a product that I think there's going to be an audience for. So whether that's like trains, like this is kind of like a historic look at the Chicago L, or like I was running the marathon and I thought, I think people would really like an illustrated marathon map. There's like 30,000 people who run the Chicago Marathon every year. They're proud of it. And so I made this map, this illustrated map, and then just like a lot of architecture-based stuff that really just sparked my interest, like about living in the city. But overall, kind of the theme was just like, how can I take an idea, like something that I'm into, or like a problem, or something I want to see exist, and like turn it into reality, and like find like an audience of people who are also into it and are willing to pay some money for it. And so that's Wonder City Studio, and that's kind of like the mindset that I had, kind of going into discovering Bubble in this no-code platform. So my problems on arriving to Lancaster, finding a place to live. You guys might know the real estate market is crazy. Meeting new people, and the street sweeper, which was like, we were living in different Airbnbs. We've lived in 4 different Airbnbs. And every time, like, there's like different street routes, and within a month of moving to Lancaster, I got 2 street sweeping tickets. And it's like, $25 each. And I was just like furious, because like I'm looking at the sign, I'm like, okay, 1st and 3rd Monday, this is like 3rd and 5th Tuesday, this is like every Friday. And it just seemed like it was kind of a maze, and I was like really aggravated, because it just felt like it was just like this money grab from the city for like, just, let's just get people. So that kind of became like one of my maybe like enduring like villains, is like the street sweeping. And I also just found it annoying to like constantly have to move my car. So I thought, like, okay, I want to kind of like explore some other, like, how can I beat the sweep, basically? Like, how can I solve this problem for myself? And I'd already been interested in kind of like exploring new things, like other than illustration, like how can I develop a skill set? So the plan was like, let me explore like how can I do this using technology and actually challenge myself to like build like a working mobile app to like solve this problem. So enter Bubble. And I discovered Bubble. I spent a lot of time on Reddit, too much time, just like different subreddits, kind of exploring things. And I started like frequenting the SaaS subreddits and some of the startup subreddits. And it seemed like just kind of a lot of paths kept leading towards Bubble as like a really great platform for like a no-code web app builder. And I really thought, like, I was thinking about doing native, but it felt like building like a mobile web app just seemed like a good path for this because it would be kind of like a shorter path to get it done and also a way to kind of like be able to use it or for other people to use it like across different devices and not just like, you know, Apple or Android. So after doing some deep dives on Reddit, you know, a lot of people kept talking about how Bubble was just great for just like very quickly getting like an MVP built and just something that you could also kind of scale with the company. So, you know, there's lots of great intuitive interfaces. It's like allows for databases, plugins. Like because it's popular, like it also attracts like a lot of developers to create plugins for it. And then, you know, also there's just kind of like a robust community of people who have built on Bubble who like the community also has like contributed to like kind of the overall information economy. Bubble handles servers, integration, security, and then you can kind of scale like with Bubble. So you can start building something for free and then, you know, you can get to the point where you do a starter plan, which is what I use to build this and which is what I think like kind of the vast majority of people who are building kind of a simple type app would do with like they say like small to moderately sized audience. So like $20 a month, it gets you a lot for that. So I felt like Bubble was just a way to really execute quickly on this idea or like any idea that you might have to like solve your problem and also like customer problems, like avoiding street sweeping tickets. So I just want to give you kind of like a very, very top level view of what Bubble looks like. You know, you can see this is the UI builder and it's just like incredibly intuitive. Like if you've ever used any kind of like drag and drop editor, if you've used like WordPress, like it's quite simple to use. You know, you have all these different visual elements here that you can put in. And then, you know, you kind of set up like on the left side, kind of like a hierarchy of where things go, just like you would with any kind of like CMS. And then in here, it's giving you your view of your UI. And then also, like you can see up top, like next to UI Builder, if you click responsive, you can also get, of course, like a view of like the mobile view, the iPad view, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, like very simple to use. I mean, I say for me, like my experience in kind of like, what can I say, like web development is just like WordPress and Shopify and doing some light customization of that. So that's where I'm coming from. I did find it like a little bit of a struggle at first, but kind of once you get going, like you start to understand like, okay, this is intuitive and now I understand like this is the hierarchy of things and when I put this here, like this is going to be the filling kind of the content. But I feel like if you come at this from a position where you have experience in web development, I think it's going to be like a much, much easier path than it was for somebody like me. And this part is kind of like what I feel like is kind of like Bubble's like real secret sauce. And this is like the workflow view of Bubble. And this is really kind of like where the functionality of the web app comes in. And up there, you can see like various triggers that you can set up on like a specific page. So the page that you're looking at is the page for like relevant sweep routes that comes up, like once somebody has already entered in their particular address. And so this is kind of like the mechanics of what's going on. And for somebody like me who's not a coder, like this provides like a very, very nice like visual overview, like a very intuitive flow of like how your like the workflow works and like what is going to happen when a particular user like does something. So like when you're setting up a trigger, like you can just like basically set it up to do something like, say, if an element is clicked or if there's any kind of like user input to a field or anything like that. And then by setting up these kind of like different steps, you can just say like, okay, this is what's going to happen. You can also do things like terminate workflows. Like if something is just totally breaking, you can just like terminate the workflow. You can also like, if you just want to totally, which I did many times, like if your trigger is just like, you think there's like one trigger that's like throwing off the whole thing, you can just disable it and then copy and paste, create a new trigger, and then just do something like completely different and then test that with your app. So this is like, you know, your user interface is kind of like, that's your top level, but this is like kind of where you're like going underneath the hood and where you're doing like kind of a lot of the work that's kind of makes your app like what it is and makes it work the way that it should. This is the kind of like database view, and you know, for me, like I wasn't doing any kind of like user database. I think maybe if I had planned this better, I would have had like a login and maybe tracked like user information and got like good user data so I could, you know, better track and better keep people like part of this. But for my purposes, I was kind of like, I just wanted the bare minimum to like make this like work for me and like help solve my problem. So I didn't really get into the data that much in terms of like the user side, but like that's definitely something that I think probably like a lot of app builders are going to go to like right away. But for my purposes, the sweeping routes was kind of like, that was like the key information. That was kind of like one of the toughest like early barriers to actually building this, because like the city has a map of the sweep routes on it, and it's like just kind of some kind of like open data where you can like click on it, you can see the routes, but like I needed to get the underlying data for that. And in order to do that, like I had to go through so many hoops. I was like calling the streets and sanitation department. I was emailing them. There's like an open data. Actually, somebody here was like, oh, I know somebody works in the city hall. And then they told me like, no, I can't get it for you. And then that kind of set my like conspiratorial mind going. I was like, what are they hiding? So I ended up having to like go to City Hall and like talk to them, and they told me like I needed to file like a right to know motion. So like I needed to become like a lawyer. And so I did that and was like, I need this and I need it by like Friday. And like to their credit, I kind of thought they were going to keep fighting it, but like to their credit, they gave it to me like on the day that I asked for it. So this is one of those things where I'm like, AI can do a lot, but I feel like there's certain things that it just like can't do. Where it's like when there's data that you need and it's being hidden, like you just need to get that in some way. But so anyway, this is the database, and like so for my sweeping routes, I just had things like, you know, is this route a daily sweep? Like which day of the week? Is it a dual day? What's the city's name? What's the official name? Or like, what am I calling the route? What is the city calling the route? Because some of the city names were not very intuitive. And then I also had like polylines, because when I got the data from the city, it was just like a bunch of like GPS coordinates that needed to be translated to be able to use in like Google Maps. And then like the route schedule. So yeah, like if you're familiar with databases, which like I'm not, like this might come very familiar to you, but like once I kind of started to like upload data and kind of figure out a little bit more about like how it worked with the rest of my app, like the more it kind of like made sense to me. So this is just like some screen grabs of Beat the Sweep. You can access, anybody can access it at beatthesweep.pro. And this is kind of like the heart of the app. I made some other pages for like just background, frequently asked questions, contact page, a link to the city's kind of like official street sweeping schedule, just so I can like have like wash my hands and be like, okay, you should still check the the real schedule. But this is kind of like the main heart of it, where like the user would like mark their spot, click on mark their spot. It would take them to this second page, which with the Google map, where you can like move around the cursor, and you can like put the cursor on where you're parked. You can use current locations, obviously, to give you your current location. And then the third act is, what are the relevant street sweeping locations? Like, I mean, what are the relevant routes next to your location? And one of the frustrating things is you can click on like a given parking spot, like a given address, and there might be like 1 to like 4, sometimes 5 like different routes, like depending on like how close to the heart of the city it is. So like for like Queen Street, there may be like 4 or 5 different routes. So that's gonna like affect the sweep date. And then you can put in like, what's the side of the street that you parked on based off of this. Is it a Monday or a Tuesday? And then kind of the main thing is like the sweep date and sending yourself a reminder. So once the user would like put in their email, then Bubble, like Bubble has the workflows that I showed you, which are kind of like, that's like more like the front end stuff. And then Bubble has some things that are kind of reserved for like the back end stuff. So like the email like sending is something that works on the kind of back end of Bubble. And so, but it works the same way, like setting up the workflows. So just very intuitive interface, very visual. And then, yeah, send the email reminder. And then it sends people the reminder like on the day before the street sweeping date for the particular address where they're parked. So that's really it. So it's something that like I found myself using, and like when I park, like I go and I put it in and I get the email. I think what I find is like I move my car like more often than I realized. So that's one thing I kind of needed to account for. Like, okay, I'm setting the reminder, which may be coming like next Monday, but I've moved my car. So like I'm getting that reminder. Now the reminder just like says the address on it, but it's still kind of like, to me, it's just not a really great user experience if I'm like getting multiple emails for places that are like irrelevant. So kind of the more I use it, the more I realize like, okay, there's certain things that I would do, but I'm also kind of interested in like, building some new things because it's kind of made me excited. Like Bubble has this kind of like a way to kind of track like how much the app is used. And like for the most part, before anybody knew about it, it was just me using it. And then I posted it on Reddit just to say like, hey, here's something that I built. Like I used it for myself. I thought you might appreciate it too. Like a lot of people seem to share the same kind of, hatred of the street sweeper. And then Lancaster Online picked it up and WGAL, and there was definitely a spike, which you can see here, but then, went back down. So again, it kind of comes down to like, I have other challenges to like, how do I make this sticky for people? How do I make it like a kind of like a must-use app, if that's what I want to do? I feel like one of the things that I realized in kind of releasing it is a lot of people just don't see this as a problem because they park like on the same block like all the time. So they're just like, for them, like a Google Calendar reminder is like sufficient. So they just set it for like the first and third Monday of the month, and then they just know like, okay, the street sweeper is coming the next day. Whereas for us, like our situation was different because we're like living in different Airbnbs. We don't like, we drive kind of like very sporadically. So yeah, it's something that kind of, where I'm like, okay, I need to think about like, what are the real use cases, and like, do people actually need this, or what can I do to kind of make it like more sticky? So like what I learned from this, like in terms of like invaluable tools. So like having ChatGPT open like as my tutor was just like one of the best things, because as intuitive as Bubble is, like there's still so many ways that I struggled like to get through things. And even with ChatGPT, it's just like, it's not familiar with Bubble necessarily. Maybe it's familiar with some of the concepts and like how to create like JavaScript. But like one thing that I realized was like with ChatGPT was like screen grabs for this are like absolutely essential. So just like I would have like the screen grab like tool open all the time to just constantly like put that in. And just, I also learned like, just like interrogating AI and just like approaching everything skeptically is like produces the best results. Because I think early on, I was just like, just tell me what to do. Like, I'm just gonna follow step by step. But it's like, it sends you down so many like rabbit holes, and I'm sure many people have like, used ChatGPT for this purpose. But it just, I feel like this process like made me better about like knowing the benefits and also limitations of using ChatGPT. The other thing that I realized with this is like, without some kind of like accountability tools to like push through the difficult parts, like I would never have finished this. So one thing that I used was called Stick, which is like, I don't know if anybody's used that, but it's basically like a way to, you can like give it, you put money basically in escrow that you don't want to lose. And it will send it to like a charity that you don't like. And then, yeah. And you have to say like, I'm gonna have this done by this time. And then you also send it, you have like an accountability partner who has to be like the referee and be like, okay, he did or did not like achieve the goal. And that was like such a motivator. Because I think otherwise I just would have let this go like totally unfinished. What's that? Oh, I don't want to say. I don't want to offend anybody's politics. Yeah. But in terms of the mistakes made with this, yeah. I think planning was probably my biggest mistake. Like I just dove in and was just like, I'm just going to try this. I'm going to make it work. And I started just like building the user interface, because like for me, I'm a visual person. So I was like, I'm just going to see if I can like use brute force. And then when I talked to a friend who's like a longtime developer, he's like, no, you need to think about like the data architecture first, and like the sitemap and the user flow, and then, you know, like wireframing, and just like coming at this as somebody who's like not experienced as a web developer, like that would have been like, that would save me so much time, probably like months of time. So like I wish I had done that and just thought like very, very carefully about, okay, what are the pages I'm going to include? What's the user going to do, et cetera. And then another thing that I think probably like a lot of people know here, but I didn't know, is it's like the last 10% is about like 90% of the work. Like edge cases, user testing, all the things that could go wrong I didn't anticipate. So in terms of like next steps, maybe like beat the sweep New York City. Somebody contacted me to do like, he was like, can you do Lebanon, PA? So maybe that's a bigger market. So then I was thinking about doing like a summary or episode directory for a comedy podcast. And then also just find people who want to do the same, just like work on things together. Like crush your side projects is like a great way to meet other people who are like motivating me to like do projects like this. Like meeting people here doing their own thing is awesome. So like it's better to work together. And maybe like having like a season of like where we just like ideate and then build and then have a demonstration or something would be kind of cool, like, and very motivating to like, you know, finish like future projects like this. Yeah, and that's it. So any questions?
Yeah, I've got three questions or comments. In the beginning of your introduction, you talked about the $25 and thinking that's the way a city is trying to make some money. I think I saw might have been a follow-up article on your project that the city said, absolutely not. We'd rather the cars just be out of the way so we can do our work.
Yeah, I saw that, and well, I am a little skeptical of that. But like when you do look at the overall like city budget, like they get most of the revenue from like other sources, like property taxes, like business taxes. And like parking violations is like kind of a small drop in the bucket for that. And street sweeping is even smaller than that. And so it probably does cost them like more money to like collect.
That's an impediment for getting the work done.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
The streets look less nice. It's always embarrassing when I, you know, have like a big mark saying that, oops, you know, my spot blocked.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
the two questions I had for you are, you talked about you wish this to be more skippable. So I was curious, what is your goal or desire for it to be more skippable? What do you think is there some benefit to you short
Yeah.
content for that, number one? And then number two,
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about liability.
Mm.
People relying on you within the town when to move the vehicle
Yeah.
and says, okay, you need to move it tomorrow anywhere it should have been today.
Yeah.
Have you thought about liability and what that may or may not mean?
Yeah, I did think about that a little bit. I mean, I have a disclaimer like on the app, like the homepage that says like, you know, not responsible for fines. Like be sure to check the signage and the city source. I do have a link to the map. So yeah, I do have kind of like an out because things do change. Like there are street sweeping holidays, and I don't even know like how the routes may change in the future, and if I'm going to keep the upkeep on this. So yeah, that is something that I have thought about. And then in terms of making it stickier, I think like having the user kind of like login, so that like getting the user information so that I could maybe have like put them on a newsletter and start kind of doing some kind of drip feed to just say like, hey, why don't you come back and try this again? Or even maybe like charging something, maybe like a fee would make people more likely to kind of like attach more value to it than they would to like a free website. So those are ideas I have for if I do the New York City one.
So your benefit or ability is to use this as a model someplace else that generates revenue.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that as the next step, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm.
I've got your upgrade idea.
Okay, all right.
So I'm not sure if Bubble would have a way to handle this, but I remember my friend Luke's talk about when he was tracking the speed of vehicles because he was a concerned citizen.
Right, right.
And he happened to discover Red Rose Transit Authority tracks the location of their buses and posts it on their website.
Yep,
Now, I'm pretty sure they don't offer that for the street sweepers,
right.
but that is a considerable upgrade to their technology.
Yeah,
Show the location of the street sweepers in real time.
yeah. I like that idea. I mean, what I did discover, because I like dipped my toe into like New York City data,
Yeah.
and they have like trackers on the street sweepers, and they have like, yeah, like there's been a street sweeper here like at 8:08 a.m. Because they're serious about it there. Like people will wait in their cars because their parking spot is so valuable, like with coffee and a paper, like until the sweeper comes, move, and then go back in.
Your process, they log a schedule on the street. And you mentioned it's like, it could be old because you're moving a lot.
Yeah.
Does your app have the ability to track location at all automatically, or
No, but that would be like a great upgrade.
you could watch accelerations and okay, they likely moving their car
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah, I mean, especially if it was a native app, like that would probably work a lot more seamlessly. Oh yeah, and that's another thing I should mention. Like, you know, obviously it would be great, like, to make this native, and Bubble is coming out with like a native app builder sometime in the future. I think right now they're like kind of testing it, but like it should be released sometime, I think in 2026.
Again, more of a comment, but it seems that what would really benefit would be the way to make it worth it for the people who could otherwise use Google Calendars.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have trouble with, you know, when should I be setting the Google Calendar, and ended up setting several.
Right.
Because that, you know, so it's like, well, the day before and then the morning of, in case I didn't get around to actually doing it. So, you know, something where it like asks you if you've done it yet. If
Right.
you don't, it'll ask, you know, ask when to remind you, or it could be one way to make it, you know, something that like does more
Yeah.
than the Google Calendar can to make sure you get it done.
Yeah, I think like when I started to hear that feedback from people, I thought like maybe something that could be done along those lines is, you know, the first page is like, I usually park on the same spot, and this is the address, and then you can just click like, you know, set the reminder from that, and so you're just getting that until you tell it not to, and then maybe you can set it for like a different address or like some way. And I think this comes back to like having like a user database that like has that kind of information to like, so I can kind of have a memory for that kind of thing. So definitely.
I do have an actual question. Do you feel like using Bubble limited you in some way, or were you able to make all your ideas online?
Yeah, I mean, I think it helped me do like what I wanted to do. So I think maybe I'm ignorant of like what another platform would let me do. Like if I was using something like Flutterflow or something like that. But it let me solve my problem, which is, you know, what I wanted.
I was curious, the data you got from the city, well, I'm hearing it talks about what day sweeping has happening. Do they break it down to morning or afternoon, so you could let somebody know that's going to be doing the morning or the afternoon?
No, they didn't do that.
Because that might be valuable for somebody who works from home and say,
Yeah.
I have to get up, not for me at that night, or I can wait until, you know, 10 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, the data from the city was like very sparse. It was just like route name and then the like geolocations. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
More of an idea, probably more appropriate for me to that, but maybe to scale it, you can use image recognition, so they can just kind of like point at the sign, and you can like read it that way instead of having the data of like all the cities. Because I feel like I use apartment software here too, and that would be cool to just like point my phone and then know that I know I need to move.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely.
Cool.
Yep.
Thanks, Phil.
Cool. Thank you. All right.